The chapters of the Space Marines are drawn from a wide range of worlds and from many diverse walks of life. Some inherit traits from their primogenitor's gene seed, whilst others bring the traditions of their home world and adapt them for their new lives. The chapter we explore today is one who seems to have primarily fallen into the latter category, as one of their primary rituals is drawn from the worlds they recruit from, and their other quote-unquote gimmick has nothing to do with the legion that sired them. They have recently been seemingly confirmed as scions of the Ultramarines, having always believed they were descended from the line of Robert Guilliman since their creation in the Second Founding. Hailing from the world of Varsavia in Ultima Segmentum and led by a chapter master known simply as Argentius, they are known simply as the Silver Skulls. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The chapter of the Silver Skulls is a very old one, having been founded at the point of the division of the Space Marine Legions. This means that they hail from the Second Founding like many famous chapters, but unlike many of the Second Founding chapters, their lineage became somewhat shrouded for a long time. In fact, until very recently, the Skulls did not really know for sure from which legion they were actually descended, though they did always behave as though they were scions of the Ultramarines and the Primarch Robert Guilliman. It was not until the return of Guilliman himself in recent times that this was officially added to records, if not exactly confirmed, proving that the Silver Skulls leaders are at least somewhat perceptive, or just good at making assumptions about how the Imperium works. The chapter made its home in Ultima Segmentum somewhere on a believed feral world known as Varsavia. Sadly, we can't pin its location down too closely, but we believe it is at least somewhere close to the Storm of the Emperor's Wrath and also to Segmentum Obscurus. We do know, though, that it is rather surrounded by various Xenos groups, with Necrons being one, but sadly that doesn't really help, since the Necrons are pretty much all over Ultima Segmentum by this point. There's some in Ultramar, there's some in the northeast, they're all over the flipping place. We also suspect that it is a world incapable of supporting recruitment for the entirety of the Silver Skulls, as the chapter is known to have several recruiting worlds that it uses to refill its numbers. I assume that some of these primary worlds are actually quite close together, maybe even within one system, as it is from them that one of the main rituals and possibly the name of the Silver Skulls is drawn: the decapitation of worthy enemies. The most powerful foes of the chapter are beheaded where possible, with their heads being taken as trophies before the flensed skulls are coated in silver. I'll be honest, if the name came before the ritual, that is far too appropriate, whereas if the name came second, then I'm curious what their original name was. Just nice to know Imperial history. Quite how many heads have been taken and displayed in Varsavia's Fortress Monastery is unknown, and also, though we have no records on the matter, I would be fascinated to see what the Skulls make of the White Scars Master of the Hunt, who of course has his victims treated in a similar manner. The chapter also have another ritual, though where exactly they got it from I'm unable to discern. Tattooing their body with honour markings as opposed to, say, putting them on their armour or what have you. Should a Silver Skull live long enough, their entire body will end up covered in these markings that denote various things. However, only those who truly prove themselves in combat will receive the facial tattoos that are the last ones earned as far as we can tell. There is another unique quirk to the Silver Skulls though, one that is almost unique to them: the Prognosticators. Now that name may be familiar to you if you know much about Grey Knight, but the name is actually slightly different. In chapter 666, they are Prognosticators, but in the Silver Skulls, you have Prognosticators. Subtle, but it's a difference. However, in both chapters there is actually some similarity in terms of roles and power. Both groups are psychers, both are renowned for divination, and the words of both can dictate the actions of their chapter and carry great weight. Mind you, the Prognosticators are much more than just a small group within the Librarium as it is within the Grey Knight. Instead, they are the Librarium in its entirety, and their jobs don't stop there. For you see, just as the sanguinary priests have a role in the Blood Angels concerning spiritual sanctity, so do the Prognosticators of the Silver Skulls aid the chaplains of the Reclusium in providing guidance for both campaigns and for the soul. Prognosticators are attached to every company, using their powerful prophetic abilities to ensure campaigns are successfully prosecuted. The chapter's warriors will widely heed these words where possible, but there are times where the advice must be, in a way, cast aside. For you see, the Silver Skulls operate under a very strict code of honour at times, and this can put them in many a tight bind, including fighting in battles that they're basically fated to lose. Even when the prognosticators tell them that they will not be victorious in the battle to come, or that they should just generally stay out of a given campaign, the Silver Skulls will still deploy on some occasions, no matter what. That said, there will undoubtedly be occasions where the advice of the prognosticators is indeed heeded, and this probably would lead to the Silver Skulls, as I like to say, pulling a Dark Angels and leaving their allies a little bit high and dry. We don't know how often it happens, it can't be too often given the reputation of the Skulls for honour that they seem to have the galaxy over. But reliance on prognosticators and the Emperor's Tarot does give the Skulls another little reputation, that of victory, but also of zealotry. After all, if your seers, whose words are considered on par with the Emperor's, have told you that you are going to win, then you will fight with the surety of faith in victory that you will win, no matter the cost, especially because in your head, the deck is very stacked in your favour. Given the weight of the words of the prognosticators, it is of little surprise, therefore, that their place in the chapter hierarchy is much higher than the librarium in many other codex chapters. The Council of the Librarians is always consulted when a major decision must be made, and though the Chapter Master is still in overall command, it is clear that the Chief Prognosticator, also the equerry to said Chapter Master, is second in the pecking order. I'd be curious to dig through the records to see if a Chief Prognosticator has ever become Chapter Master and or pulled double duty with both roles at once. But keeping a track on this is actually a little more difficult than it might be in other chapters like, say, the Blood Ravens, who definitely do this. This is because the Chapter Master, or Lord Commander, always changes his name upon his ascension to the role as far as we can tell, adopting the name of Argentius. The reason seems to be to the honour of the original Chapter Master from the earliest days of the Silver Skulls, but those who know their ancient Terran languages will be aware of the double meaning. Argent, argent, however you like to pronounce it, is a word commonly associated with silver. So admittedly, I'm curious whether the name Argentius came before or it came after the chapter name, because that may be tied to the ritual and all of that stuff, so interesting history lesson if we could just get it out of the record books. Despite being a second founding chapter, several millennia pass until records confirm the presence of the Silver Skulls on a battlefield. This engagement was in M35, though it did not take place in real space, instead being fought within the labyrinth dimension known as the Webway. This wasn't a campaign that the Skulls directly oversaw, as they instead came to the aid of the Salamanders alongside the Howling Griffins. The Sons of Vulcan were planning a raid on none other than the Drakari city of Commorragh itself, in an attempted reprisal for raids orchestrated by Asdrubael Vecht that had actually also captured a Salamander battle barge. Details of the raid itself are a little sketchy, at least in terms of who was doing what, but we do know the result. For most everyone concerned, the battle was a success. The Salamanders got their barge back, the Drakari got a bunch of powerful prisoners for their arenas, and Vecht used the instability created to overthrow the leaders of Commorragh and seize power within the Dark City. Everybody wins. Things go quiet after that until the aftermath of the Age of Apostasy in early M36, as part of the Plague of Unbelief that actually had nothing to do with Goj Van Dyer, but is often tied into the Age of Apostasy because it happened around the same time. This series of rebellions most famously invaded, then died on, the Space Wolves' homeworld of Fenris before its leader was defeated on the world of Cathalamor, but the Silver Skulls got involved in their own way too. Most notably, they deployed against an uprising by a human group known as the Cult of the Red Heresy, who had managed to spread its influence across 7 separate star systems. However, the manner in which the Skulls came to face the cult is interesting, in that it was the cult's mysterious primary supporter and benefactor who sold them out to the Imperium. Said benefactor was none other than the infamous fallen angel known simply as Cypher, who has of course been known to jump across the Chaos Imperium boundary multiple times down the years. Quite why Cypher decided to build a major anarchist or chaos cult only to sell it out and have it torn down is unknown to all save Cypher, but that's what happened, and though the cult had a lot of territory, I don't doubt the Silver Skulls dealt with them pretty easily. Unfortunately, it will be the best part of a millennium or maybe even two until we next have a record of the Skulls on the battlefield. Some claim this battle took place in early M37, whilst others say mid-M38. But what is known is that the battle is known as the Antechinus Massacre as part of the 9th Black Crusade. Taking place on the High Wood of Antechinus IV in Segmentum Obscurus, this battle was an attempt by War Master of Chaos Abaddon to silence the dockyards of the nearby Imperial Navy. The leader of the Black Legion placed enough importance on this that he led the attack personally at the head of a vast and varied Chaos war host. The Silver Skulls were the first responders to this incursion, using hit-and-run fleet stratagems to great effect as a stalling tactic. Unfortunately, they were never able to make any headway in terms of planetfall or whatnot, meaning that Abaddon still completed his objectives and vastly depopulated Antechinus IV. And when the Astra Militarum was finally able to arrive, the limited number of Skull ships could not keep the likely stronger and more numerous Chaos fleet at bay, and Abaddon's group blasted their way clear and abandoned the planet to a grueling war between remnant Chaos forces and the Imperials. The Silver Skulls did their best, but the dockyards ran out of workers before too long, and the forces of Chaos put much of the sector to the flame as a result. However, the next time we know they took to the field, they would meet with much greater success. The campaign in question is not a renowned one, mind you, taking place in the late 700s of M38 and known as the Great Mulligan Purge. This was a war sanctioned by the Senatorium Imperialis to a group of 5 chapters known as the Manus Irae, though only 3 are known: the Silver Skulls, the Charnel Guard, and the ill-fated Firehawks. The task was to, well, purge the Malagantine sector, a known hotbed of unrest and heresy. This sounds all very run-of-the-mill, but the details of the campaign are not lost to time, but rather sealed away, even supposedly from the Inquisition, who of course answers to none save the Emperor. Quite why this is the case is unknown, but it is thought that the death count ran to over 100 billion in the Malagantine Purge, which may have had something to do with it, I don't know. After this purge, the Skulls kind of fall off the grid again for millennia, next making their appearance almost exactly 3,000 years later in the Corinth Crusade. This one is yet another campaign in which the Silver Skulls were part of a wider engagement, this time spearheaded by Lord Macragge, Marneus Calgar and the Ultramarines against the Orc warlord Skargor the Despoiler. The role of the Skulls here is completely unknown, as the Ultramarines and the Lamenters ended up grabbing all the headlines, but the campaign was a success, and Skargor was slain by the bearer of the Ultramarines chapter banner. After that, well, things get interesting. In late M40, we believe that a demonic champion of the warband the Soulmaw was slain by a Silver Skulls prognosticator, and whilst the warband didn't exactly rush to get vengeance, they did get their payback. In 954 M41, more than a full millennium later, much of the chapter was called away to face a demonic incursion on the world of Aragave, a vassal and possible recruiting world for the Silver Skulls. However, the demons mysteriously vanished after the Astartes arrived. We have no idea if it was the Soulmaw, but somehow I suspect it was. Either way, it set the alarm bells ringing for the prognosticators, who began to suspect that Varsavia itself would be invaded by demonic forces before long, and as their visions often are, they were correct. It took a couple of years, but Varsavia was besieged in 956 M41 by the forces of the Soulmaw. However, it doesn't seem like this was as big a deal as it could have been, as far as demonic incursions go anyway, and Varsavia was defended by the Skulls despite only having a small number of forces on world. The Skulls then get pulled into a couple of major campaigns, committing forces to the Third War of Armageddon and supplying a few squads to the Ultramarines-led Zeist campaign against the Tau Empire. However, there are a couple of campaigns that the Silver Skulls more directly prosecuted, one of which is sadly undated. The first I wish to address is one we mentioned back when we discussed the Death Spectres quite recently, the blockade of the Lazar system. The Silver Skulls inadvertently brought this one on themselves somewhat, as they screwed up the visions of Necron Cryptek Orican the Diviner by destroying an Orc fleet. Orican was then forced to rewind time and preemptively destroy that Skull's force so that the Orc fleet wasn't destroyed, which caused the chapter to blockade the Lazar system in 847 M41 in an attempt to purge it. Joined by the Death Spectres and others, there was great success early on in the campaign, as the primary tomb world was destroyed before reinforcements were able to reawaken. Unfortunately, a few years later, the Necrons received fresh external reinforcements, the roving forces of Anrakir the Traveller. The Silver Skulls were the only ones left on the blockade by this time, and the former ruler of Pyria turned the tide. Anrakir's machine dominion turned a down battle barge on the Astartes, killing the Argentius at the time and eventually forcing the Skulls to withdraw. The second, and perhaps more infamous, are the battles in the stellar region known as the Gildar Rift, not that far from Varsavia in fact, as far as we know. Battle broke out here after the Space Wars vessel the Wolf of Fenris appeared in system, now swearing allegiance to the Red Corsairs under Huron Blackheart, who had recently scuttled and then recruited it. Not long after, the rest of the former Astral Claws and their band of renegades followed their most recent acquisition, forcing a response from the Silver Skulls. Despite being renowned space reavers, the fleet of the Red Corsairs were bested by the Skulls and forced to scatter, leading to a ground campaign across several worlds. And again, the combat went in favour of the Imperials as opposed to the Renegades, and supposedly the entire Gildar Rift was purged in only a few short weeks. To conclude, though there is only limited information, I wish to look at what we know of the famous Silver Skulls. Unfortunately, much of the information is sparse. For example, the deeds of the Chapter Masters are completely unknown, save the one who died in the Lazar blockade. We do believe that the current Argentius was the former 6th Company captain, known before adopting the title as Artreus, but aside from hearsay, I have no concrete evidence to back that claim up. Someone we do actually know more about, though not a frontline warrior per se, is a potentially fundamental part of future chapter operation. Volker Straub never actually made it to the rank of full-fledged Astartes, as the Prognosticators intervened before the implantation of his progenoid glands and basically stopped him from getting there. Given he was seen as a bit of a prodigy with high expectations for his future in the chapter, you might be wondering why the librarians felt the need to pull him out. Well, apparently, the Silver Skulls have a little project in the works known as the Resurgence Project, which as far as I can discern is a biomechanical integration between the body of a test subject and a warship's machine spirit. I suspect that some of the Adeptus Mechanicus would be furious at the concept of such a thing, but it happened anyway, and Straub was integrated with the strike cruiser Dread Argent that saw action in the Gildar Rift. This link with the machine spirit gave him effective control over all systems, making him able to steer the ship and fire weapons more effectively than the crew could ever hope to. This became critical as the forces of Huron Blackheart made a withdrawal from Gildar Secundus and opened a warp rift far too close to the Silver Skulls for comfort. The Dread Argent would have been destroyed were it not for Straub, who managed to navigate the debris field whipped up by the Immaterium and saved the ship and all hands aboard. Speaking of prognosticators, one of the more renowned of them is an individual known as Renan Triol, currently seconded to the Death Watch. He is supposedly the foremost authority on the Eldari in the entirety of the region where he is deployed, the somewhat legendary Jericho Reach, with a particular focus on the Drukhari after they attacked his forces before joining the Death Watch. Triel was actually recruited into the Death Watch by an Inquisitor in order to join what's known as the Dead Cabal, studying a series of prophecies known as the Dark Pattern. Guess that being a Silver Skull makes things like prophecies his sort of specialty. We are unsure how much time he spends on the battlefield, but his field of research does involve weaponry, and specifically the study of them and other artifacts using his abilities. These psychometric studies, as I believe they are known, have led to greater understanding on the value of Spirit Stone tech to the Graph-World Eldari, as well as giving a glimpse onto the soul-draining curse placed by Slanesh on the Drukhari following the Eldari's fall. And whilst we're on the subject of Drukhari, let's talk about a couple of individuals known to have fallen foul of the denizens of Komara in what is known as the Uriah Massacre. At an unknown time, the world of Uria was raided by the Dracari, with the Silver Skulls deploying in an attempt to stop them under the leadership of a Captain Alton and Epistolary Thule. I suspect Thule was the one to foresee the outcome of this battle, being a prognosticator and all that, but if he did read the tarot, it would have been a grim reading indeed. This battle went pretty horrendously, mainly thanks to the power of the Homunculus Covens and their Kronos parasite engines. The Infernal Contraption was able to use its abilities to drain the life force of many Silver Skulls, Captain Alton included, potentially tipping the battle in favour of the Dracari along with their reinforcements. It became, as the battle's name suggests, a massacre, and almost none escaped alive. Epistolary Thule was one of them though, which is interesting given he, as a psycho, would have the more valuable soul to some members of the Covens. There are a few other minor known Silver Skulls, none of whom sadly are Primaris save one Redemptor Dreadnought who's already dead. I suspect that being Sons of Guilliman, the Silver Skulls happily welcome their new cousins, well, probably Sons of Guilliman, but how much of a role they now play day to day, considering that they're just part of the chapter now, is kind of unknown. Like, what are percentages in terms of Primaris versus old school? Don't know. So end the tales of the Silver Skulls. Seemingly scions of Guilliman from the second founding, the Skulls have done much to distinguish themselves in the eyes of the Imperium. The Prognosticators and their visions might infuriate some allies by keeping the chapter out, but their valour and faith in a victory they believe is assured make them an undeniable asset for the majority of the time. As the Prognosticators also guide them as best they can outside of battle, I wonder what path they will foresee for the Silver Skulls in the future with the new era in the galaxy. Now, it is time to depart from Varsavia and head on to the next instalment of the Champions of Humanity miniseries. I think our next destination will be a world we've yet to visit in this series of logs, though rather like our last little jaunt to Baal, I don't really have a particular champion in mind for this log. However, I think completing the series without speaking of a former legion even once would be doing a disservice, so let's go and remedy that. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.